War had a rhythm. You learned to wake to the sound of boots scraping gravel, to sleep with the percussion of distant mortars, to eat in 30 seconds because you never knew when the next alarm would sound. For 6 months, that rhythm kept me alive. 6 months of desert heat, of dust that never washed out of my hair, of silence broken by the crack of rifles. And through it all, I carried one picture. Not of my squad, not of the landscape I'd come to hate. It was of Emily, my wife, my anchor, the girl who'd been waiting tables in a roadside diner when I first asked for her number. She'd sent me letters every week, some short, some long, each sealed with a lipstick kiss. They smelled faintly of lavender. On nights when the sandstorms raged and I wondered if the sun would rise again, I'd pull those letters out and remember why I was there. To come home to her. When the bus finally pulled into Fairview, my chest ached with anticipation. Families lined the parking lot, waving flags, holding banners scrawled with "Welcome Home." Kids ran forward. Soldiers scooped them into arms. Mothers sobbed into uniforms. My boots hit the ground, and for the first time in months, I thought I could breathe. I scanned the crowd for Emily's auburn hair, for the soft smile that had carried me through the noise. She wasn't there. At first, I told myself she was running late. She hated crowds. Maybe she was waiting at home, planning to surprise me. I clutched my duffel, nodded to a few neighbors who waved, and climbed into a cab. The ride felt endless. Every corner of town carried a memory where we'd shared milkshakes, where we'd first kissed, where I'd promised her I'd always come back. The cabbie chatted about gas prices, about politics, but his words blurred into the hum of the engine. All I could think was, I'm almost home. The house looked the same from the outside. White paint peeling on the shutters, flower pots Emily had promised to replant, still sitting empty. My heart thumped as I climbed the steps. I rehearsed the moment. She'd open the door, gasp, throw her arms around me. I'd lift her off her feet. We'd laugh. We'd cry. I turned the knob. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled different, sweeter, heavier. Candles. Music played low from the living room, not the kind Emily usually listened to. Something smoother, sultrier. I stepped into the hall, duffel dropping from my shoulder. The sound of laughter floated toward me, soft and intimate. A woman's giggle, her giggle. Followed by a man's voice, deep and unfamiliar. I froze. The living room came into view, and there she was, Emily, my Emily. Except she wasn't mine in that moment. She was in another man's arms. He sat on our couch, shirt half open, one hand tangled in her hair, the other on her thigh. She leaned into him, laughing at something he whispered, her face glowing in the candlelight. For a second I thought I'd hallucinated, that the war had broken my mind, that my brain, desperate for drama, had conjured an image too cruel to be real. But then, he kissed her, slow, confident, and she didn't resist. She pulled him closer. Something inside me snapped. I must have made a sound, because Emily's head whipped around. Her laughter died on her lips, replaced by shock. "Michael," she whispered, eyes wide. The man turned too, frowning, then smirking when he saw me standing there in uniform. He didn't even flinch. I stepped forward, my voice low but sharp. "Get your hands off my wife." Emily scrambled to her feet, nearly tripping over the rug. "Michael, I can explain." "Explain?" I barked. "Explain how 6 months at war turns into this." I gestured at the man, at the candles, at the betrayal dripping from every corner of the room. The man stood, adjusting his shirt lazily. "Calm down, soldier. Don't make a scene." My fists clenched. "Who the hell are you?" "Jason," he said smoothly. "Emily and I... well, let's just say you left a vacancy. I filled it." The rage that surged through me was unlike anything I'd felt on the battlefield. Out there, anger was survival. Here, it was destruction. My hand twitched toward the duffel. Inside was nothing but clothes, but I swear I felt the phantom weight of my rifle. Emily stepped between us, tears in her eyes. "Please, Michael, don't. This isn't what you think." I laughed bitterly. "It looks exactly like what I think." Jason smirked again, that smug curve of his lips that begged for a fist. "You can't blame her. You were gone. A woman needs more than letters and promises." I took a step forward. He didn't move. For a heartbeat I imagined breaking his nose, hearing the crunch, watching that smirk vanish. But discipline held me back. Not mercy discipline. the kind hammered into me through years of service. Get out, I growled. Before I forget, I'm home. Jason raised his hands mockingly. Fine, but don't expect her to be waiting when you come back next time. He brushed past me, the scent of cologne trailing like a stain. The door shut behind him. Silence crashed down. Emily stood trembling, tears streaming. Michael, I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Didn't mean? My voice cracked. I fought every day for 6 months, Emily. I fought to come back to you. And you? My throat closed. You didn't even wait. She reached for me. I stepped back. I was lonely, she whispered. I was scared you wouldn't come back. He was there. He made me feel safe, I spat. Loved? Whole? Don't use war as an excuse for what you chose. She crumpled onto the couch, sobbing into her hands. I stood there, my uniform heavy, sweat beating at my temple, my heart pounding like artillery. The home I'd dreamed of for months had turned into a battlefield. The woman I'd longed for was now the enemy, or maybe just collateral damage. I grabbed my duffel and walked back out into the night. The cool air hit me like a slap. Neighbors' lights glowed in windows. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Life carried on, ordinary and indifferent, while mine collapsed. At the end of the block, I stopped under a street lamp, my shadow long on the pavement. I wanted to scream, to collapse, to punch the pole until my knuckles broke. Instead, I whispered to myself, the words tasting like blood, this war isn't over. Morning found me in the cheap motel off Route 9, the kind of place that pretends at privacy with thin curtains and thicker air freshener. I hadn't slept so much as drifted in and out of a loop, the door opening. Emily's laugh, Jason's hand on her thigh, my name breaking on her lips like a wave that never reaches shore. I showered twice and never felt clean. By 7, I was back in my truck, duffel on the passenger seat, knuckles tight on the wheel. The town looked smaller in daylight, like someone had washed it and shrunk it in the dryer. Fairview's main street yawned awake, barber sweeping his stoop, Alma's diner snapping on the neon, open. A pair of high schoolers skateboarding past the drugstore with the brazen immunity of kids who don't know what can hurt them yet. I didn't want breakfast. I wanted a place to sit, where the floor didn't remember my life. Alma saw me through the glass and tilted her chin like a mother hen who'd already decided what you needed. The bell over the door gave me away. Michael Turner, she said, not loud, not soft, just right. Sit anywhere. I took the end of the counter. She poured coffee like she was loading a rifle. Efficient, certain. Heard you got in yesterday, she said. Heard wrong things too. Her eyes were kind and unsparing. Alma's mercy never came wrapped in lies. Folks talk, I muttered. They always have. Talking isn't truth, she said, dropping a plate in front of me. Eggs, toast, bacon like a flag of better days. But it's weather. Dress for it. 3 stools down, a pair of mechanics from McGraw's garage whispered. One of them looked over, caught my eye, looked back down, guilty. The cook radio crackled with an old country song about leaving and the price of coming back. An old fella in a seed cap raised his cup like a salute. I nodded. There will always be hands that help and hands that push. The trick is learning which is which before you fall. I ate because a body needs fuel to carry grief. Halfway through, the doorbell chimed again and Jason walked in like a man born to it, slim navy sport coat. Crisp white shirt open just enough to suggest he'd never had to sweat for anything. For a beat he didn't see me. Then he did. The corner of his mouth curled. Sarge, he said, as if we'd served together. Sleep okay? Alma stiffened. We don't do scenes in here. Jason spread his hands, pacifying a jury. Just being neighborly. He slid into a booth, back to the wall, able to see the door and the counter predator seating. A woman from the accounting office joined him, all perfume and nervous laughter. The town's eyes pinged between us like a metronome. I kept mine on my coffee. Every fiber in me screamed to walk over and rearrange his face. But I hadn't survived 6 months of mortars to get caged by one stupid punch. War teaches you. The first swing is the enemy of the last word. I paid, left too much cash, and stepped into the brightness. The day had sharpened its edges. On the way to the truck, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. We should talk. Today. About him. A second later. Behind the rec center. 11 a.m. Come alone. No name. Just the gray bubbles of a life about to change again. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Maybe it was a trap. Maybe it was a life raft. I texted back one word. Okay, and drove. Between now and 11 I tried to reclaim something that looked like order. I went by the VFW hall to check on the paperwork for my GI Bill classes. The plan before deployment had been to knock out a certification in diesel diagnostics and finally open a shop of my own. Jim at the front desk looked up from a stack of forms, took one look at my face, and came around the counter with a bear hug only ex-sergeants can give without apology. Heard, he said into my shoulder. You breathing? Trying. Good enough for today. He slid me a clipboard. We'll get you squared away. You'll need something that's yours. He was right. A business license is a thin shield against humiliation, but it's a shield nonetheless. When I left, two old men playing cribbage stopped their game to nod. Solidarity isn't loud. It's a hand on the back when nobody's watching. At 10:52 I parked behind the rec center, where the town kept its well-meaning, poorly funded weights and treadmills. The lot was mostly empty save for a minivan with soccer decals and a dented Civic breathing its last. Wind worried the cottonwoods, whispering secrets I couldn't quite catch. She came out of the side door like a question she'd asked herself too many times. Mid-30s, hair in a practical knot, sensible flats, a cardigan that made it seem like she trusted warmth more than fashion. She didn't come too close. You're Michael, she said, not asked. I'm Hannah. I waited. Jason's secretary, she added, and flinched, like she'd been expecting judgment to hit her like hail. Not the one the town thinks about. I'm the other job. I nodded. Let her build to the leap. She looked over her shoulder, lowered her voice. He's not what he looks like. I mean, he is. But there's more. Always more with men like that. He keeps a second phone. A black one. He calls it work, but it's where the ghosts live. Different names in there. Venmo handles that don't match. Women in 2 counties and 1 in the city. He's a collector. The word crawled. She swallowed. Your wife, Emily. She's not the first and won't be the last. I told myself it wasn't my business. Then I saw your picture on her mantle when I delivered documents last week. In uniform. Shame flushed her cheeks. I've been trying to quit for 3 months. He makes it expensive to leave. Fear isn't a metaphor when you've seen what men do with power. Why tell me? I asked. Because he thinks you'll swing and get arrested, she said, eyes wet but steady. And he'll win again. But he has tells. The phone. A storage unit out by the old mill number 117. He keeps records there he doesn't want at home. And he's got the sheriff in his pocket for little favors. Not big ones. Just enough to make a good man tired. She thrust a folded paper into my hand. Gate code. Today only. His calendar says he's visiting a supplier till 2. I stared at the paper, then at her. Why help me? She bit her lip, jaw trembling into its own resolve. Because I'm done being afraid in private. And because you didn't deserve to walk into what you walked into. She stepped back. Don't tell him my name, please. You have it anyway, I said, even if I don't. She nodded once and left, walking fast like a woman who'd just put down a weight she wasn't sure she could ever lift again. I sat in the truck with the paper in my palm until sweat glued it there. Courage comes in different uniforms. Today it wore a cardigan and carried a gate code. I drove east toward the old mill, where the town's past sat rusting into history. The storage place had the cheerful cruelty of all storage places. Rows of tin doors, heat shimmering off gravel, a keypad standing guard like a soldier who hated his post. I punched the code, and the gate slid back with the bored inevitability of bureaucracy. Unit 117. I killed the engine 2 bays down and listened distant highway whine. Cicadas in the trees, my own pulse. I rolled the door up slow. The smell hit first cardboard and cologne, the stale musk of secrets. Fluorescent flicker, a single bulb, a collage of carelessness. Banker's boxes labeled with lies, clients, 2024 Q3, TAX, tucked among gym equipment, a spare suit bag, a dated espresso machine. The black Pelican case on the shelf above eye level was the kind of thing men like Jason buy because they think it makes them look prepared. It was heavy and locked with a 3-digit wheel. I tried the obvious 000, 123, 911 no joy. I let my eyes go soft the way we did on patrol, not looking for a thing but for disruption. The edges of the case had fine scratches around the second wheel, deeper on 7, 8, 9. The first wheel had a grime polish on 2 and 4, the third on 3. I spun 283. The click was small and enormous. Inside, the black phone, a coil-bound ledger with columns too neat to be honest, a flash drive, and a leather wallet with 2 IDs, his and a second in a name close enough to fool anyone not paid to notice. I didn't touch more than I had to. I photographed everything, wide shots, details, the case in the unit number, my watch face for timestamps. I bagged the phone and the drive in a Ziploc from my glove box like some television cop I had no business imitating, then froze at the sound of gravel outside. A truck eased past. Not his wrong sound, older suspension, a teenager's bass fizzing under country rap. I exhaled, fast. 2 minutes later I backed the phone to airplane mode, powered it, and watched the lock screen bloom. A brunette on a balcony, city skyline behind her, captioned, "My view." The passcode took 3 tries, birth date from his ID did it. Contacts rolled like a rap sheet. C, Amber Jim, Emily H, Ember, J, City, a dozen initials. There were transfers hundreds at a time, memo lines like wellness, tuition, rent. I didn't need to know who they were, to understand what he was. Predator accounting. I put everything back exactly, spun the lock, lowered the door, and left the way I'd come. The gate shutting behind like a mouth that had already decided you hadn't been there. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. The town wears uniforms well, including the kind men like Jason buy for other men. Chain of custody matters, but so does timing. I drove to Claire's office instead, the attorney who had helped my squad mate settle a messy custody case the year before. She had a widow's posture and a surgeon's eyes. "You look like a man trying to decide whether to set a fire or draw a map," she said as I handed her the photos. "Both," I said. "In that order." She flipped through, not making a sound she didn't need. "You did good," she said finally. "It's a start. Don't touch the ledger again. Don't move anything. If this is what it looks like, financial coercion, multiple women, maybe misappropriation, we build this properly. You come to me first, then we choose our cop. There are 2 in this county who still remember their oath." I told her about Hannah and the bribe-sized favors. Claire nodded. "Then we stay boring and relentless. We don't give him the fight he wants. We give him paper he can't outrun." "What about Emily?" I asked, hating the way her name still tried to soften me. "She called twice. I haven't picked up." "You will," Claire said, not unkind. "But not today. Today you protect the future you still own." She leaned in. "You also book a consult with the VA counselor down the street. You're walking a minefield, anger, shame, sleep you can't catch. The wrong step helps him." I felt the reprimand like a hand on my back. "Yes, ma'am." "Good," she said, and sat back. "Now, one more thing. You need to anchor in something that isn't this. A job, a shop, a plan that doesn't have his name in it. GI Bill," I said. "Diesel diagnostics. Working toward a bay I can lock when I need to. Then we start there too." By late afternoon the town had done what towns do. Metabolized new information without admitting it had eaten anything. I got 3 texts from unknown numbers, each a different flavor of pity or poison. "Heard what happened. She did you wrong. If you ever want to talk, I work nights. Maybe if you'd been a better husband." I blocked, deleted, let the words pass through like glass splinters I was too tired to pluck. I parked outside my house at dusk and stared at the front door like a veteran eyeing a house that might be rigged. Lights on. Shadows moving. Our porch swing creaked with the heat's exhale. I didn't want to go in. I didn't want to be a man standing in a kitchen he'd paid for explaining fidelity to a woman who'd bartered it away for companionship and candles. But the deed had my name. So did the mortgage. Cowardice doesn't wear my boots. Emily opened before I could knock, like she'd been waiting on the other side with a hand on the knob and a prayer on her tongue. Her eyes were swollen, her sweater inside out, the kind of detail I'd have found adorable in another life. "Michael," she said, and the name broke in the middle. "Don't," I said. I walked past her into the living room. The candles were gone. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and apology. "I'm not here to fight," she said behind me. "Good," I answered. "I'm fresh out of losing." She came around the couch and stood in front of me like a student waiting for a grade. "I made a mistake." I laughed, short and unpretty. "You made a series." She flinched like each word was a pebble I'd thrown at the tender part of her chest. "I was lonely." she whispered. I was scared you wouldn't come back. Jason, he said all the right things. He made it easy not to think. Cowards make thinking expensive, I said. You paid with my life. Tears slicked her cheeks. I ended it. This morning. I told him not to call me. I told him I choose us. Somewhere in the house a pipe ticked as it cooled. I stared at the woman I'd married, same freckle at her jawline, same kindness in her mouth when she wasn't defending her wrongs and wanted to believe. Want is a dangerous architect. It can make a palace out of plywood. There is no us, I said, quieter than I felt. Not today, maybe not again. She reached for me. I stepped back. I found his other phone, I added, and other things. This wasn't an affair, Emily. It was a pattern. You're not special to him. You were a stop on a route. She folded in on herself, a sail losing wind. I'm so sorry, she said, and I believed she was. Being sorry is a receipt, I said. I need the refund. She nodded like a penitent. What do you need? I almost said time. I almost said proof. I said, space. I grabbed a change of clothes and my shaving kit from our bedroom, our landing like a bruise, while she watched the archway like something sacred had walked through and wouldn't return if she breathed wrong. At the door she whispered, Do you still love me? The question hung there, heavy and rightful. Love is not a light switch. It is a generator a man learns to shut down in stages so he doesn't blow the house. I don't know, I said, which was the truest thing in the room. Outside, the evening had cooled into the kind of dusk that makes even bad decisions look cinematic. I climbed into the truck and put my forehead on the wheel, counted to 50, then started the engine. The phone buzzed as I pulled away. A new number again. He's on his way to you. Then, a second, he's drunk. Then, a third. I could feel in my spine as I read it. He knows about the unit. I parked 3 blocks over and killed the lights. The street to our house lay quiet, a ribbon of intention in the dark. I dialed Claire on speaker. He's coming, I said, to the house, and he knows about the storage. Claire's inhale clicked through the line like a seatbelt. You are not there? Number. Good. Do not go back. I'm calling Ortega, she said, naming the one detective with a spine people still told stories about. If he shows, we have a harassment charge. If he breaks anything, we have more. Do not meet him. He wants heat. Give him paper. What about the unit? He'll panic and move it, she said. We already took photos. Sometimes you let the fox run. It shows you all the holes in the fence. And Emily? The name came out like a pebble I couldn't spit or swallow. Call Alma, she said. I trust her more than the sheriff second in command. She'll go sit on your porch and bake cookies if she has to. A woman on a porch is security the law can't write down. Claire hung up to dial Ortega. I dialed Alma. On my way, she said. No questions, like she kept her cape under the counter with the paper hats. 10 minutes later she texted a photo of her on my steps, knitting needles out. Smile like a dare. Tell him to try me, she wrote. I watched the corner like a man waiting on artillery he can't quite calculate. Jason's Mercedes slid in 3 minutes later. Too fast, too loud, the kind of arrival that depends on everyone else's good manners. He idled at the curb, door opened before the engine stilled, and swaggered toward my porch. Alma didn't stand. She didn't put down her knitting. She just looked up at him over the rims of reading glasses and said something I couldn't hear. He laughed, then didn't. He gestured, big, the way men do when they realize a woman hasn't given them the stage they rented in their heads. He took one step up and saw the red dot that wasn't there. Ortega's unmarked, slipping in behind him, 2 plainclothes out, and moving like gravity was an order they still respected. Jason froze, then smiled like he'd been joking all along. They spoke. Papers were exchanged. A finger wag turned into a signature. The Mercedes backed away slower than it had arrived. Alma texted me one more picture, a close-up of a citation with his name typed neat as a future headline. Paper, she wrote, not heat. I drove past the block 10 minutes later with my lights still off, just long enough to catch Alma's eye. She tapped her temple and shooed me along. I obeyed. Back at the motel, I sat on the bed with the phone in my palm, its screen full of names I hadn't earned but would have to carry. Husband, soldier, fool, survivor. I opened a note and wrote 3 lines I could live by. 1. Don't swing. 2. Keep receipts. 3. Build something. As if summoned by that last imperative, An email slid in from Jim at the VFW. Class confirmed. Orientation Monday. Proud of you. I stared at it until pride beat out shame by half a breath. Sleep almost found me when the black phone Jason's buzzed where it lay face down on the nightstand. I'd forwarded its calls to a burner Claire set up. The screen lit with a name labeled only C. I let it go to voicemail, then played it back. A woman's voice. Low, city slick. Not from here. You're an idiot, she said without hello. Storage was sloppy. If the soldier found it, others will. Call me back from the number that doesn't exist, and we'll clean what's left. If you don't, you're on your own. Another long breath, and cut off the wife. She's a liability. The message ended. In the quiet that followed, I realized two things at once. The war I'd stepped into was bigger than a living room betrayal, and the next move wasn't to burn anything, it was to listen harder, to gather, to make the map so complete that even a crooked sheriff would have to follow it. I lay back and stared at the ceiling like a sky I'd once prayed under, and whispered the promise I needed to hear in my own voice. This ends on my terms. Outside, the motel's ice machine coughed. Somewhere on Route 9, a semi-downshifted toward another town's troubles. My phone buzzed one more time, a text from an unknown number that made the hair on my arms stand. You don't know me, but I know him. Meet me tomorrow, 8 a.m. The Wick's back room. Bring what you found. He took something from me that I intend to take back. I stared at the words until resolve clicked in like a magazine seating right on the catch. You don't reject allies in a war you didn't start. You choose them, carefully, and you keep your hands steady. I killed the lights and let the dark hold me without promise, the way night always does when it's honest. Somewhere between anger and sleep, I pictured the storage unit, the ledger's neat lies, Alma's needles clicking like a metronome of patience, Claire's flat voice saying, "Give him paper," Hannah's tremble turning into spine, Emily's hands twisting a sweater inside out, Ortega's pen arresting a man who thought he was immune, my own name on a class roster that had nothing to do with betrayal, and everything to do with tomorrow. And I knew the chapter had turned not because the pain had eased, it hadn't, but because I finally had a plan that didn't depend on anyone else's apology. Tomorrow. The Wick. Tomorrow. The ledger twice copied and one set in a safe I could open in my sleep. Tomorrow. Another step away from the living room where a candle had tried to make lust look like love. I closed my eyes and kept listening the way you do downrange when silence is a language, and the night, if you respect it, will tell you where the danger island. Somewhere between breaths I heard something new, small but unmistakable. Not peace, not yet, but the first clean click of a life beginning to reload. I used to think the hardest part of war was surviving the desert, surviving the nights where silence felt heavier than the body armor strapped to my chest. But it turned out, the real struggle wasn't over there. It was here, in Fairview, in a town that had known me all my life and yet now looked at me like a stranger. Everywhere I went, whispers followed. At the grocery store, women stood in the aisle with their carts angled just so, their voices pitched low but sharp enough to cut. That's him, the one whose wife couldn't wait. That's the soldier who came home too late. They didn't even bother to look away when I caught them. Some faces were pity, others smug satisfaction, as if my humiliation was entertainment. I had fought men who wanted me dead, and that was simpler, cleaner, than fighting the gaze of neighbors who thought they knew my story. Emily tried to pretend she could ignore it. She still went to church on Sundays, her belly under dresses that made people count months on their fingers. I sat beside her in the pew once, and the stares burned so hot I walked out halfway through the sermon. She followed me home, crying that we couldn't let them win, that we needed to show strength. But strength, to me, wasn't sitting in a sanctuary full of hypocrisy while the woman who had betrayed me sang hymns. Strength was holding my tongue when I wanted to break silence with fury. I tried to get work, to anchor myself in something useful. McGraw's garage had always taken me in before, when I was young, when I was broke, when I needed purpose. The foreman met me at the door, wouldn't hold my eyes, said Jason had too much influence, too many contracts tied up in his company. "I can't risk it, Mike," he muttered. If it were up to me, but it wasn't up to him. Jason's shadow stretched further than I'd imagined, covering even the bolts and grease of honest work. I shook his hand, thanked him for telling me straight, and walked away with fists that wouldn't unclench. Bills piled up on the kitchen table. The deployment pay I'd saved had thinned quickly. Half of it had already vanished while I was gone. Emily spending on things she called necessities, though some receipts told other stories. Now the mortgage notices came red-stamped, the electric bill doubled, insurance premiums looming. I sat at the table at night, staring at the stack, my breath shallow. In Iraq we measured survival in hours. Here, it was in dollars, and I was running out of both. Emily tried her own version of penance. She cooked dinners she hadn't cooked in years, left notes with little hearts drawn at the bottom, whispered at night that she loved me, that we could fix this. But her eyes betrayed her. They carried fear, guilt, and something else, uncertainty. I could forgive a mistake, but I couldn't forgive a woman who wasn't sure she wanted forgiveness. And when I asked her, late one night, whose child it was, she pressed her hands to her face and whispered, "I don't know." That uncertainty carved deeper than any knife. Jason never disappeared. I saw him everywhere, the diner, the gas station, even leaning against the wall outside the courthouse. His suit sharp, his smirk sharper. He never spoke, not directly, but his eyes said everything. She chose me once, she'll choose me again. Each time, the urge to smash his face roared inside me. But I remembered Claire's words when we'd spoken briefly before. Don't give him heat, give him paper. I didn't fully understand yet, but I held on to it. My rage could put me in jail. His arrogance could hang him if I waited. The nights were the worst. Sleep ducked away from me. I'd lie in the dark of the guest room, staring at the ceiling, listening to Emily's muffled sobs down the hall. In Iraq, I had feared bombs. Here, I feared the silence, because silence made space for every memory, every betrayal, every vision of her laughing in another man's arms. Sometimes I'd stumble into the garage, hands blackening themselves on tools just to remember what work felt like, what purpose smelled like. Oil and steel made better company than guilt and tears. It was Alma, from the diner, who saved me from sinking too far. She came by one evening with a loaf of bread and a look that didn't ask permission. "You need to eat," she said simply, setting it on the counter. She never mentioned Jason's name, never asked about Emily, just stood there as if her presence itself was a reminder that not everyone in town had turned against me. When she left, she pressed a folded note into my hand. "Keep your chin up. Wolves hate men who still stand tall." That scrap of paper kept me steady more nights than I could count. And then came the letter, slipped under my motel door after one of the nights I couldn't bear to stay in my house. No return address, no handwriting to identify, just a single page typed clean. "He's not finished. He wants your wife. He wants your house. And if you don't stop him, he'll take them both. There's more you don't know. Meet me tomorrow, 9 p.m. The Wick. Back room. Come alone." I read it once, twice. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the confirmation that this war wasn't just between me and Emily. It was bigger, dirtier, and Jason was at the center of it. I folded the paper into my notebook, the same one where I wrote down every lie, every receipt, every word that didn't fit right. That notebook had become my rifle, my weapon of record, my proof against shadows. I sat on the motel bed, the letter burning in my pocket, and whispered to myself the same words I'd spoken in the desert when everything felt lost. I won't surrender. The Wick's back room smelled of old smoke and secrets. The velvet curtain fell shut behind me with a sigh, muting the chatter from the bar outside. I stood alone at a table scarred by decades of knives, bottles, and whispered deals, the kind of table that had seen more betrayals than any battlefield. My notebook was in my jacket pocket, the letter folded crisp between its pages. 9 o'clock ticked on my wristwatch, steady as a heartbeat, steady as the silence pressing down on me. The curtain shifted. I half expected Jason, drunk and smirking, ready to bait me into a fight. Instead, a woman stepped in, mid-40s maybe, hair pinned back, eyes alert behind square glasses, a folder tucked under her arm. She carried herself like someone who'd walked this tightrope before and knew exactly how far she could lean without falling. "You're Michael Turner," she said, her voice calm but cautious. "I am," I answered, waiting for the catch. She slid into the chair opposite mine. "My name's Claire. I used to work for one of Jason Kincaid's companies, Compliance, which is just a fancy way of saying I spent years cleaning up messes he paid me to ignore. I stopped ignoring when I realized he wasn't just dirty, he was dangerous." She tapped the folder. "You want to know the truth about him? It's all in here." I didn't move. "Why bring it to me?" Because you've got nothing left to lose, she said simply. And because men like Jason only fall when someone who's been humiliated decides to stand up. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of wire transfers, invoices marked up with red pen, property deeds signed under shell names. At first, it was just numbers, but then the pattern snapped into focus. Jason wasn't just some rich city slicker sleeping with other men's wives. He was siphoning money through Fairview dirty deals disguised as development projects, charity funds rerouted into his own accounts, payments to judges and deputies who turned their heads at the right time. The weight of it settled heavy in my chest. I thought this war was about my marriage. It wasn't. It was about a man who had built an empire out of rot. Emily was just one brick in his wall. Why me? I asked again, my voice lower this time. Because you're already in it, Claire said. He won't stop at your wife. He won't stop at your house. He'll keep coming until he breaks you, unless you fight back. I closed the folder, my hands steady even though my stomach churned. What do you expect me to do? March this to the sheriff he already owns. Not the sheriff, she said. But there are people outside this county who'd be very interested in Jason Kincaid. Regulators, investigators, the kind who don't care about his charm. She leaned forward. But before we go that far, we need proof he can't erase. That's where you come in. She explained what Hannah, the secretary, had already hinted at. The black phone, the storage unit at the edge of town. The ledgers he kept because arrogance makes men think they're untouchable. He'll try to move them once he realizes people are sniffing around. We need to get in before he does. I sat back, the bar's dim light flickering across the folder in front of me. I thought about the desert, about how every mission started with uncertainty. You never knew if the intel was good, if the man beside you would freeze, if the plan would hold. You just knew that doing nothing was worse. Claire placed a small slip of paper on the table. Gate code. It won't last forever. Go tomorrow. See for yourself. Once you have it, we can decide how to burn him down. I slipped the paper into my notebook, next to the letter that had summoned me here. My war had found its map. When I left the wick, the night air was sharp, the stars cut deep into the dark. Fairview slept quietly, unaware that one of its golden suns was rotting from the inside out. My boots crunched on the gravel as I walked back to my truck. For the first time since I came home, I felt something that wasn't just grief or rage. It was purpose. This wasn't only about Emily anymore. This wasn't only about a marriage wrecked while I fought overseas. This was about a man who thought he owned everything in reach: money, power, women, even my life. And tomorrow, I'd prove him wrong. The next morning, the paper with the gate code felt heavier in my pocket than any weapon I had carried overseas. I drove out past the old mill, down roads that smelled of rust and summer weeds, until the rows of metal storage units came into view. They stood like a regiment of secrets, each tin door guarding someone's private war. I parked 2 bays down, kept the engine idling for a long moment, and listened. No sound but cicadas, no motion but the shimmer of heat on gravel. Unit 117. The numbers glared at me, plain as a target. I keyed in the code, heard the gate grind open, and rolled the door up slow. The smell hit me. First paper, cologne, dust. Inside were bankers' boxes stacked with labels like clients and Q3, an espresso machine still in its box, a suit bag, weights he probably never touched, but on the top shelf sat a black Pelican case, heavy, locked with a 3-digit wheel. I turned it in my hands, let my eyes go soft. The dials bore the faint polish of habit finger oils on 2, 8, and 3. I spun the code, and the latch clicked. Inside lay the heart of Jason Kincaid's arrogance: a black phone, a leather-bound ledger, and a flash drive taped to its cover. I snapped photos of everything with my own phone, careful not to disturb more than I had to. The ledger's neat columns told stories dirtier than any battlefield transfers: aliases, payments to initials I recognized from Fairview's offices, bribes disguised as charity, money funneled through shells. I was tucking it back when gravel crunched outside. I froze, every nerve lit. Through the crack in the door, a Mercedes idled at the curb. Jason stepped out, suit jacket tossed over his shoulder, sunglasses flashing in the Sunday. He wasn't alone. Emily was with him. Her belly was unmistakable now, and her face carried a strain I hadn't seen before. My heart punched against my ribs. I'd prepared myself for enemies, not for her. Jason's voice carried. Relax. I just need to move a few things before anyone pokes their nose around. Emily murmured something I couldn't hear. They drew closer. I shoved the case shut, spun the lock, lowered the door halfway, and slipped out the back. My boots crunched too loud. "Who's there?" Jason barked. I stepped into the open. "Me." He stopped dead. Emily gasped. "Michael." Jason's smirk returned, sharp as glass. "You never learn, do you? Always showing up where you're not wanted." "Funny," I said. I was about to say the same. He stepped forward, hands spread like he was calming a crowd. "You think you've got something? A phone? A ledger? That's not evidence. That's paper. And paper burns." Emily clutched her stomach, eyes darting between us. "Please, don't do this here." Jason ignored her. "I took your wife, Turner. I'll take your house, and when the baby comes, everyone will wonder if it's yours or mine. Either way, you lose." His words sliced deeper than any blade, but I'd spent months sharpening my own. I pulled my phone from my pocket, screen glowing with the photos I'd just taken. "Already sent. To someone who doesn't burn paper. You're finished, Jason." For the first time, his mask cracked. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed. He lunged as if he meant to snatch the phone. But I didn't flinch. I'd faced men with bombs strapped to their chests. His threats were small by comparison. Emily stepped between us, her voice breaking. "Stop, both of you." She turned to Jason, tears streaking her face. "Tell him the truth. Tell him what you told me last night." Jason's glare burned into her. "Don't." But she did. She looked straight at me. "Michael, the baby, it isn't his, it's yours." The world tilted. Blood roared in my ears. For weeks I'd lived in the torment of not knowing, of imagining every possibility, every betrayal. And now the truth hit me harder than any explosion. The child she carried was mine. Jason laughed, harsh and humorless. "You believe her? She'll say anything to keep you. She's been in my bed too many times to pretend innocence now." I stared at Emily. Her face was raw, desperate, stripped of any mask. "I was weak," she whispered, "but I never stopped loving you. And when I found out," her voice broke. "When I found out I was pregnant, I prayed it was yours. And at Island, I swear it." The silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. Jason shifted, fury darkening his features. "Even if it is, you'll never prove it. By the time anyone checks, I'll own every judge from here to the city." I took a slow step forward, my voice steady. "Maybe. But tonight the town won't hear your lies. Tonight they'll hear mine." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" I held up the phone again. "The gala. Your big announcement. Claire and I made sure the files will go live as you speak. Your empire isn't fireproof, Jason. It's soaked in gasoline. And I just lit the match." For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. Real fear. Emily clung to my arm, trembling. Jason backed toward the car, his smirk gone, his mask crumbling. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You think you've won, but I'll burn you both to the ground." He slid into the Mercedes, slammed the door, and tore off in a spray of gravel. Silence fell, broken only by Emily's sobs. She pressed her forehead against my chest, whispering, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I stood rigid, my arms half raised, unsure whether to hold her or push her away. Part of me wanted to bury her in forgiveness. Another part wanted to leave her in the ruins she'd built. But one truth cut through the noise. The baby was mine, and Jason's reign was ending. The war wasn't finished. The battle was just beginning. Morning crept into Fairview like a cautious guest, sunlight sliding over rooftops that still smelled of last night's heat. I sat on the porch of the motel, coffee cooling in my hands, watching the town pretend at normalcy. Somewhere across the square, Jason Kincaid's world was cracking, though most folks didn't yet know how deep the fault lines ran. My phone buzzed with messages from Claire files already moving through channels bigger than our county. Regulators, investigators, reporters. Jason had spent years bribing, lying, buying silence. He couldn't buy the tide that was about to sweep him under. But justice is slow, and rage is fast. And between those two, I had to find a way to live. Emily came that afternoon. She stood in the doorway of the motel room, hair pulled back, eyes hollow but determined. Her hand rested on her belly. "It's true," she said before I could ask. "I had the test done. The child is yours." She reached for the envelope in her purse and set it on the table like an offering. I didn't open it. I believed her this time, not because of the paper, but because of the way her voice cracked. "I ruined us," she whispered. "But maybe I don't have to ruin you. If you can't forgive me, I'll understand. But please, don't let him win. Not with our child in the world." Her words cut, not with accusation but with a plea. I looked at her, at the woman I had once crossed oceans for, and felt the strange ache of love and betrayal tangled together. I couldn't untangle it, not now. But I could choose what kind of father I would be. That night, the gala lights glittered across town. Jason strutted onto the stage, microphone in hand, smile wide as ever. He opened his mouth to charm the room, but halfway through his speech, the screens behind him flickered. Not the glossy images of investments and promises he'd planned, but rows of documents, wire transfers, ledgers the proof of his rot. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing like muzzle fire. Jason stammered, then shouted, then cursed, but his voice drowned in the roar of exposure. By the time the police arrived, tipped off by Ortega and backed by evidence no judge could ignore, Jason was pale and sweating. They cuffed him in front of the town he thought he owned. Emily stood in the back, tears streaking her face. I stayed in the shadows. This wasn't my victory to gloat over. It was justice finally finding its way home. In the weeks that followed, life shifted. Jason's empire collapsed. Businesses cut ties, allies vanished, and the man who once smirked at me in diners now sat in a county cell, awaiting a trial that promised years behind bars. Fairview's whispers changed tune from pity to respect, from gossip to gratitude. Folks shook my hand again, called me sir, said they'd misjudged, but the damage had been done, and forgiveness from neighbors was nothing compared to the storm still raging inside my house. Emily and I filed the papers quietly. Divorce, custody agreements, the division of a life 20 years in the making. We sat across from each other in Claire's office, signatures scratching the page, and for the first time in months, there was no anger in her eyes, only sorrow and a flicker of relief. She kept the house, I took the garage, and our child, when he was born, would know both parents but not under the same roof. The day my son arrived, I held him in my arms, his tiny fist curling around my finger. Blood of my blood, a life I had almost lost before it began. In that moment, the noise fell away, the whispers, the betrayal, the shame. There was only him, innocent, mine, standing by the hospital window, watching dawn spill over Fairview. I whispered a promise, not of revenge, not of rage, but of resilience. "You'll never fight the battles I had to fight," I told him. "Not while I breathe." Justice had been served. Jason was ruined. Emily had lost me, but she would raise our boy with love. And me, I had been broken, humiliated, burned. But I had not surrendered. I had learned that dignity isn't the opposite of revenge. It's the reason for it. When I left the hospital that morning, the town was quiet, the air cool. My boots struck the pavement steady, each step an oath to myself. The war was finally over, and though the scars would remain, so would I. I was home.